Books to read instead of Murakami and Mishima. I know, certified Murakami hater, certified Mishima hater. Listen, I saw a video on TikTok where this person, I'm not going to say who they are, but you know, young, white woman who was like, you hate the books I like? I don't care. Swipes over, and it's like this very strange mishmash where it's like you've got Han Kang and even like Meiko Kawakami, but also you've got Mishima and Murakami in there, and you've also got some like Western authors mixed in there, but it's very clear this person likes Japanese literature. Guess what? I like Japanese literature too, but I feel like they are in that zone where I was when I was 18, and it's unfortunate that you know, it's my mission to make sure no one else is like how I was when I was 18, where I was into Murakami. I really thought Murakami was a fantastic author, and it's because I didn't have that wide reading, but this person does, and I don't get it. But I think it's because they value only style, writing style, and not content of writing. And I think there's different people who care about different things in books. Some people purely care about how a book is written and how it's presented to them. And I cannot deny that Murakami's writing, for many people, is like, wow, this is so different, this is so out there, especially if it's like a very few Japanese authors you read. And Mishima's writing is very floral and beautiful, but there's no analysis of the contents of that writing, which I think is more so what I care about as someone, and I think there's different people and things. So let me just tell you some different authors to read and why. Because, and again, this is my opinion, but also I've had people in my comments reflecting this, and also people from Japan as well reflecting this in my comments. Murakami very much has this Epstein-esque vibe to him. I'm not going to say the actual word because I've seen YouTube not push videos when I say the actual words. Epstein-esque vibe in all of his writing. The way he talks about women is such a negative way of doing so, and also reflects much of how women are viewed in Japan. I want to say mostly of Murakami's generation, but I've had commenters saying no, this is how they, as a Japanese person, feel like many Japanese think as well. And again, people aren't monoliths, but that's how, you know, that's what I'm saying. And I mean, even from a writing style perspective as well, as someone who's read most of his books, I think almost all of them, they just don't evolve. There's one book where I feel like he experimented and it just went back to normal from there. It was Hardboiled Wonderland or something. That's the only one where I felt like, oh, there's some experimentation going here, and then he just reverted back to the style he's had for the entirety of his books. Mishima, fascist. And I think it's because people, and I made this mistake, don't realize Mishima was a fascist, because the way it's written, it's like, truthfully, no one actually believes this. This is a joke, right? This is clearly a satire. This cannot be someone's ideological framework. And they're like, no, this is what this guy believed. I'm like, it sounds like he's making fun of fascism, and that's just how absurd fascism is as an ideology. It's just stupid, and Mishima is just simply exhibiting that in his writing. And, you know, mostly this is coming from The Sailor Who Fell from Grace of the Sea, which, again, I will reiterate this, when I read it, I was like, and I made a video, I was like, oh, this is just scathing satire of fascism. Fascism's stupid. And people were like, no, dude, this is what this guy actually thinks. I was like, holy shit. So let's talk about some other authors you could read instead. That was actually quite a long intro. I'm sure I would have time coded that at the beginning. So this list is going to be Japanese authors, obviously, and I'm going to start with one which I think was on that person's list. Obviously, I didn't save the video or anything, I can't remember what it was, but I think Yasunari Kawabata was on that list. I've got Beauty and Sadness here. I've only read Beauty and Sadness, but also I did some looking into Kawabata as well. And even though he did have a working relationship with Mishima for a while, he was like, bruv, your ideology is dumb. And they very clearly disagreed and went away from each other. But Beauty and Sadness is an example of taking the themes and ideas that in particular someone like Murakami writes about. You know, he talks about relationships and their thoughts on women and writes women in a certain way, and Kawabata, and age gaps in relationships as well. And Kawabata has a very similar, you know, especially in Beauty and Sadness, themes in this book, but the way it is written, it's very clear that Kawabata is talking about how Japanese society treats women and how it's wrong. Whereas when Murakami talks about it, he's like, and this is how I treat women. It's very, it's not a critique of it. I think people, I'm not going to compare him to Nolan because I don't study Nolan very deeply. But people like Nolan uses the women as a vehicle for the men, and I feel like Murakami does that as well. But in Murakami's case, the women are often exploited, and I don't feel like that's necessarily the case with Nolan. But going back to Kawabata, in Beauty and Sadness, these women are treated a certain way by Japanese society, and particularly because of their ages and their relationships with older men. But it is very clearly written in a way where, yes, the man in this, the power he has, the patriarchal power he has in this book, is being critiqued, is what has set the actions of all of these women in motion, and it was his power over these women. Whereas in Murakami's case, these men will have power over these women and then they are discarded, and the women purely exist for the men to be able to like move. Sometimes the men will be like, damn, maybe I should respect women, you know? Or sometimes just like, damn, I'm not going to say what I was going to say because it can be clipped out of context, but damn, X thing about this young girl, yeah, damn. And it's like, what the frick? So if you're gonna read Murakami in particular, and also Kawabata's relationship with Mishima, read Yasunari Kawabata. Why are you showing you this? I'm gonna just show you it on the screen. Yeah, I just felt like if you're gonna read a Murakami, read Kawabata instead. It's similar, at least Beauty and Sadness is similar themes. I will go off and read more Kawabata because just, yeah, I'm talking about it. I will go off and read more Kawabata, but yeah. Can't make a video about Japanese literature without talking about Hiromi Kawakami, can I? My favourite author. And I don't think Kawakami is a perfect author either. She does address many of the themes that, again, Murakami is addressing, but does it much better. In particular, an age gap in relationships. But it is this from a female perspective. But also, I will say, she has books where I felt kind of a bit off about it, and reading those books, Kawakami also was like, this was like a low point for me when I was reading this, but when I was writing this, sorry. But even with that, you can see that she is trying to tell something. She is trying to talk about the exploitation of these young girls and women, but maybe the way she went about it didn't work. But again, it's never glorifying what the men have done, which is unfortunately the case I see in Murakami, but also in Mishima. If we're looking at From Grace, we're looking at what is it, A Body of Steel, whatever the hell his philosophy book is. It's this fascist viewpoint on women, on how as a man I've got to be in control and protecting these women, you know, they can't be soft and effeminate, you know, women that are so weak and all of that. Kawakami isn't doing that. Hiromi Kawakami is very clearly not doing that because, well, she knows what it's like to actually experience and be on the other side of these, the patriarchal power of men in Japan. And even with that, writes about these age gap relationships where at point some of them are problematic. I'm thinking about the 10 Loves of Mr. Nishino, which, funnily enough, just to plug it, movie club for August, we are talking about the Tales of Nishino, which is a film adaptation of that book. But also then you've got Strange Weather in Tokyo, where it's like slightly different and you don't feel as like, this is a bit weird. Or you have Dragon Palace, which is a collection of short stories where you feel like there is this, she is trying to experiment with these ideas of sexuality and love, and you can see where she is trying to look at it from different perspectives, but also she is like, there is very clear exploitation in what many people perceive as love in some of her short stories in Dragon Palace. So you're going to get that wide range. If you want those themes, which I think maybe some people are after when reading Murakami, Hiromi Kawakami is a much better way of looking at it, and also an author who has a breadth of like ways of writing about it, but also in interviews has spoken about the struggles she's had with, you know, actually pinpointing that as she's written. Let's go with another author who I feel like does something that Murakami wants to do but does it better. We'll talk about Banana Yoshimoto. Banana Yoshimoto is really great, and the one thing I like about Yoshimoto is we don't know much about her. Like, she is a very private person from what I have seen, and even like, if we're purely going off the Wikipedia page, we don't know too much about her. We know she comes from a very artistic family, but we don't know very much about Yoshimoto. And look, I might be completely wrong about her as an individual, but from what my writing, from her writing, you can see she does, and also this applies to Hiromi Kawakami as well, she does this magical realism thing that people love Murakami does. I'm thinking about Wind Up Bird Chronicles and his trilogy, which is 4 books, his first 4 books, what is it, the rat trilogy or something, I can't remember off the top of my head. Like, this magical realism thing he does throughout a lot of his like more popular books. Yoshimoto does something similar, and Kawakami does something similar, Hiromi Kawakami, and with that it's done in a much more engaging way. With Hiromi Kawakami, it's very heavy, it's in there, it's more akin to Murakami's, where you are very much thrust into this world that is really part of the story, but it's really like, oh, okay, this is like, oh my god, I'm in it. I can feel it. Whereas Banana Yoshimoto is a little more subtle with it. You can feel the thin veneer of it throughout the books. I'm thinking, what's it called? Premonition. I sort of thought that was premonition, we'll call it. You can feel that almost. It's through there, and premonition in particular is a bit of a. Again, if you're looking for relationships which aren't standard, Yoshimoto as well kind of talks about it, but it's also like the characters do point out this is kind of, we don't know how I feel about this. They do have their criticisms of it, whereas Murakami's like, damn, how old are you again? Yikes. But again, if you are wanting to read something which is challenging those ideas of relationship and age, Yoshimoto and Kawakami write about those. So yeah, I think I'll wrap it up with Sayaka Murata. Sayaka Murata's books are really like, they're in your face. They are not for the faint of heart, but the things Murata talks about are so important, and if you can stomach some of them, I'm thinking Earthlings in particular, if you're gonna stomach it, you should, because it is a reflection of life for women in Japan. I think like my biggest criticism is like the fascist and misogynistic leanings of Murakami and Mishima, not respectively, because I said them the other way around, but you know what I mean. But Murata challenges them in her books, and I feel like that is the biggest thing to take away from it. I just feel like the contents and the themes behind these books are such a better reflection of where we should be as a society and where we should be pushing for, compared to the things Murakami and in particular Mishima write about. And again, also writing style wise, Murata, from my opinion, is a more modern writing style, but not on the case where we're seeing a lot of books that are being pumped out a lot and they're really bad, but modern enough that they are accessible but also really hit hard. And I feel like that's also something we need to appreciate. If you're just thinking about style, this beautiful flowery language that you see Mishima talking about I feel like that's such an appeal to almost, again, fascism, where there's this appeal to old aesthetics, the past is better, and I feel like that's much of the feeling I get with Mishima, that kind of writing style, and why people are so drawn to it. But Sayaka Murata, fantastic author, and one I think everyone should be reading just to really understand, particularly like misogyny and that feeling of it in Japanese society. Look, I will say I'm gonna get people in this who are like, you hate Japanese people, you disgusting Japanophobe. It's just not the case. It's truly not the case. They'll say you can't talk about Japanese culture. I'm like, okay, you know, I'm talking about how I have seen it through these books and the writing in these books and what people have said to me. And yeah, fine, you'll say, oh, whatever, you hate the Japanese, and I'm not gonna convince you otherwise, am I? Like, with all of my understanding of the history and the culture and the books, we will differ on our understandings and ways we see it. And again, I am not calling out that creator. I don't even remember their channel or what. I don't remember them. But I feel like I'm a young person who was stuck in this trap of, I've just experienced, not just Japanese, because Hankang is mentioned in that list, East Asian literature, and wow, how beautiful and different it is to much of the literature I have written. I've read, I keep saying written, I have read, but yes, I feel like you've got to read these other authors. And there are other ones I haven't mentioned in this either, which I could really talk about, the likes of Meiko Kawakami and the author of Butter, whose name escapes me. But yeah, I just wanted to make this video because it's annoying to keep seeing Murakami and Mishima being pushed by particularly young people. My camera's about to die, so thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. Remember to like, subscribe, and hit that share button with your friends and family members. That doesn't make any sense. Thank you for watching. Hope you read a great book today. Don't make it Murakami and Mishima. Don't!